Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast,
where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we're discussing whether or not Deadpool has saved the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, I think that there's an argument to be made that he has.
Yeah, if you ask Deadpool, he definitely has saved the MCU. I think he made that pretty clear. But Deadpool and Wolverine has been a phenomenon the past few weeks, and I feel like it has done so well. Everybody that's going to see it has seen it. So I think we can talk some spoilers about the movie, talk a little bit about the movie, but also talk the MCU, in terms of the bigger picture, because I do think the past few years have not been going well for the MCU. I mean, Deadpool tells Wolverine, hey, you're kind of joining at a low point, which is kind of a funny joke, but I do think the tides have potentially turned. So we're going to kind of get into that, just talk about like why Deadpool and Wolverine works, where we think, does this really, revitalize the MCU? There's been some other big announcements about, Marvel recently with Robert Downey Jr. coming back. So kind of getting into all of that. But before we get into that, I want to cover the Disney news of the week. So this week in sort of Disney Cruise Line news, we got some first looks at the Disney Adventure. Now this is Disney's ship that they bought out of bankruptcy. So this isn't a Wish class ship. This is, somebody else's ship that Disney purchased, and they're kind of retrofitting.
It looks beautiful.
It does. So that what they first showed is this imagination garden. And what I love about it is just that the ship is open.
It looks beautiful. Like the inside has like a giant atrium that lets in a lot of light, which again, if you've listened to this podcast enough, you know that one of the complaints, the only complaint that we really had about our cruise on the Wish was we felt like it was very, very enclosed. So it felt very like you were, I don't know, on a building that rocks a little bit. So this sort of seems to kind of answer that critique. Even though you're not technically outside, it lets in a lot of light, like natural light, through like the glass ceiling.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought it was open. That's a glass ceiling, it looked like?
Yeah, I looked at it
I thought it
wrong.
was open.
Okay.
But
let me amend that and just say natural light,
yeah.
because whether it's glass or open.
It does. You're right. I mean, having all that natural light come in looks really great. I think they released a couple of the restaurants, or I don't know if they're like full restaurants or bars, but there's one that's Mowgli's and one that's Grandma Talia from Moana. Those looked very underwhelming to me in terms of theme. Now, again, this is like a 3D animation of it, so it's not like the final thing. So hopefully some of the other restaurants are a little bit like better themed. Some of the rooms look really good. But no, this ship looks great. The other thing is this is going to have a Marvel show on it. They announced Deadpool will be on this. So again, it kind of gets into our discussion today about Deadpool and his impact, but really excited to see more of this ship because it's a very big ship too. So there's a lot of these like little neighborhoods around there. So I think, they have a lot more to announce. Even, we just saw this kind of first thing with this garden and kind of the stage out there, but I think there's a ton more stuff they're going to have with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. They even have, they touted that it has a castle, but it's really just like a castle artwork.
It looks like a mural.
Looks a little bit like 3D, but I thought that was kind of a funny thing because I legitimately thought that they are going to build like a mini castle.
Well, they said it's going to be the first castle at sea, but yeah, it does kind of look like, again, in the animation, more like a mural type
I feel
thing,
like if it was a castle at sea, they should build like an Atlantis type castle. Like is it Atlantis or Atlantic? What is it called in The Little Mermaid? Is it Atlantis?
Well, there's I thought you were talking about the movie. They could go with that too, but The Little Mermaid's more popular. Yeah. And then over at Walt Disney World, got some more information on the new DVC Tower going in at the Poly. And so this is going to open in December. It still feels like, based on pictures, like they got a ways to go, for 3 months here to kind of be open. But there's going to be a Moana splash pad, Moana on her boat, and that kind of got installed. So that's there now. So that looks cool. So it really seems like they're really leaning into the Moana theme at the Polynesian. I know, a few years ago they redid a lot of the rooms in the Polynesian and themed them to Moana. Yeah. So this seems like they're really just going to lean into it even more in terms of the new tower they're building over there.
Which is smart because of the way that they're going with the movies, creating a second Moana, potentially a live action Moana, and the fact that Moana is one of their more successful movies on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and it's a perfect tie-in to the Polynesian.
Perfect, yeah.
Like it just makes sense there. So.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into Deadpool. So some quick kind of numbers on Deadpool and Wolverine. It is now officially the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. As of the time we're recording this, it's a little over $1.1 billion at the global box office. Its opening weekend was $212 million domestically, which is up there with Spider-Man No Way Home, Infinity War, and Endgame. Wakanda Forever was the last one that had a pretty big opening. That did $181 million opening, so it beat that. It is now the sixth largest domestic grossing movie for the MCU at $550 million domestically. The movies before that, so again, now this is starting to get into the discussion of,
is it saving the MCU?
Is it saving the MCU? You know, the MCU had been on a slide, and I think there was a lot of people even discussing that of, you know, has the MCU lost something, hasn't it? Well, the previous movies before Deadpool and Wolverine, you had the Marvels, which made $84 million, not opening weekend, $84 million total at the domestic box office. I believe that's the worst one. I think, but previously to that, it was The Incredible Hulk, which was the second movie ever in the MCU. So that's the lowest grossing one. You had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which did $358 million, which was pretty good. Ant-Man Quantumania, which only did $214 million. And they had Wakanda Forever, which did $453 million. So you did have some successes in there.
Yeah, Wakanda Forever did well.
Wakanda Forever, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. But you had some that didn't work. You also had the Eternals in there before these movies, which did not work at all in terms of box office numbers, just in terms of story.
In terms
everything.
of a movie. Yeah, I tapped out on that one an hour in. We watched that one at home.
Yeah, I mean, that one just did not work on a number of levels. So, yeah, so after Endgame, the MCU has definitely been kind of up and down. And this doesn't even counting like the Disney Plus shows, which again have kind of been up and down in terms of story and just kind of what's going on. And I think Disney's kind of fessed up to this of like, hey, we just made too much stuff, really.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like some of those numbers are weird. Like, I don't know why. So I thought the Marvels was a pretty good movie. I don't know why it didn't do as well. I thought it was fun. I liked, what's her name? Kamala Khan. Kamala Khan was a great addition to that movie. I don't know. But again, just speaking strictly off of this, and I mean, Deadpool was definitely a far better movie than the Marvels, but yeah, like it is interesting to me what movies do well. Like the fact that Quantumania made more than it, and I did not see Quantumania, but I would bet you the Marvels was a better movie.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the Marvels came out after Quantumania, and so again, it's like you're starting to get into this narrative of Marvel's not doing well, you know, and I think, and people aren't excited for what's happening, and I think that is some of the biggest things. So whether you make the argument of, you know, Deadpool changed the course of the movies, or because I think a lot of people going into Deadpool and Wolverine were expecting a lot more in terms of the impact to the overall MCU. I mean, there's always rumors on these movies, but I mean, there was rumors that, you know, Deadpool's going to bring back Tony Stark. Deadpool's going to somehow change something and you know, bring Tony Stark back, bring Captain America back. Something is going to happen. At the end of the day, the story was very self-contained. Deadpool goes back to his universe. He's not in the MCU kind of sacred timeline, and really, he could go away and never show up again, and it would be completely fine. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, obviously, but I think the big impact of the movie is this whole idea of anchor beings. And we'll kind of get into that. But at the end of the day, it really didn't have the impact on kind of the MCU timeline that I think, at least I was expecting. I think some people were expecting. But yet I still think it had a huge impact because it changes the narrative. And I think, and we've talked about this, like so much of pop culture and entertainment nowadays, in movies and in theme parks, everything Disney does is kind of just about the narrative. And so when the MCU, when the narrative is, their movies aren't doing well. And this kind of happened to Pixar too, where like Pixar was the number one movie every time it came out, and then all of a sudden The Good Dinosaur doesn't do well, another maybe doesn't open number one, and then this whole thing is Pixar's broken, people aren't going to see Pixar anymore, and you need something like Inside Out 2 to kind of change the narrative. And I think that's the same thing, where you have some hits and misses. The Disney Plus shows maybe are hits and misses, that now that you have a movie that made $1 billion, everybody's like, oh, well, Marvel knows what they're doing now, and people are talking about it in a positive light. And sometimes that's almost what you need, is just people talking about it positively again to get people excited to go to the movies.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, especially now, because I feel like a lot of people have the mentality of, I'm just gonna wait till it comes out in like at home, and I'll watch it there because it's probably gonna go on Disney Plus, particularly for Disney movies. So you need a little extra incentive. Like, you want to be in on that buzz, the initial buzz, and you don't want any spoilers to come out and kind of like ruin anything for you, especially with a movie that you know might be big. So like, I feel like it was you need to be just a little bit above any, like a cut above the rest, in order to really like get that groundswell and get people like galvanized to leave their homes and go to a theater and see it. But I mean, it definitely did that, and it has so much, I don't know, like kind of like cool fan love and like recalls to the other movies, and just like Deadpool does this really interesting thing that I really enjoy, of kind of calling upon, it calls upon, like, again, like I said, the other movies, but also like it goes into and dips into like pop culture a little bit as well. And then a part of it feels like very also nostalgic, because you have the music that is like, you know, older music. It's not like current music. So it sort of attracts, you know, like kind of like a millennial crowd, or so it's just it strikes a really interesting balance.
So you bring up a lot of good points, and one thing I kind of want to focus on is that, you know, the idea of like kind of nostalgia and like the callbacks and like bringing the other characters together, because I think that's the other thing where I'm hoping that Marvel kind of looks at this and is reminded, this is what people like about Marvel movies. Like, what I feel like made Marvel movies successful in the past was, we want to see characters that we know interact with each other in interesting ways. And we also want to see different genres and formats of movies. So like, if you look at the early MCU, every movie was kind of a little bit of a different format. So like, The Winter Soldier was this political thriller, which was kind of a different turn than what they were doing. You had a couple Thor movies, and then with Thor Ragnarok, you take a kind of a different tone with Thor. It's a little bit more of a comedy turn. And that movie really stood out and did well, because it took Thor, it took Loki, it took characters that you knew, it put them in an interesting dynamic, it added some comedy to it, and it kind of changed everything up. You know, you look at Infinity War, it kind of changed the whole model, where the bad guy was basically the main character of the movie. And so it's a completely different perspective. So if you look at some of those movies, those are some of the, better received, larger box office. Captain America Civil War, you have Iron Man and Captain America fighting. Again, two characters that are supposed to be on the same side are having this disagreement, and now they are kind of enemies, frenemies, and that gets people excited. And I think what has kind of happened after Endgame is, and people have said this, and I think rightly so, is Marvel's kind of lost their way. Like, they got so focused on, we need to set up the next thing, and they're too afraid, it feels like, almost to take risks, where it feels like, we've talked about this, like, you go into every movie and basically where all the characters are at the beginning is basically the same place they are at the end. Like, there's no growth, there's no story, there's no arc to any of them anymore. And I think that's why it's suffering. And I think that's why people aren't maybe necessarily interested. To your point, The Marvels, I thought, was a good movie, but I think it was characters that you have Captain Marvel that people know, but the other two characters were introduced on Disney Plus shows. So if you didn't watch those shows, you didn't know them. So you had no like investment in that team up. And it was kind of a story that was like, did this story need to be told to have them together? Like, nothing really move forward or happened, and it was characters that I think a lot of people maybe didn't necessarily know.
Yeah, I don't know. I have theories that Captain Marvel didn't do as well, partially just because it was a female-led movie, and so I think that some of the, you know, hardcore comic book nerds that are male don't necessarily identify with that and didn't go out to see it. I might be completely wrong on that, but I do feel I feel a little defensive of it, just because I feel like it still hasn't been like the female-led movie that we need. Like, DC only hit probably one of their movies in the first Wonder Woman. They hit so hard and so good, and I think that, I'm not saying the Marvels is anywhere near that, and I think that it did well, like, in the box office, but I don't know. I don't think that Captain Marvel really as a character just excites people. I don't think they have that dynamic female character that they can, like,
and that's my point. So they didn't build out that character, and then I think the story obviously struggled. Like, it seemed very much that Secret Invasion, which was a Disney Plus show, really should have been Captain Marvel 2, and that was kind of the sequel, because basically all of those characters are from the Captain Marvel movie, and it was a sequel without Captain Marvel. Like, it seems like that's the movie they should have made as kind of the sequel, and so I think that show suffered because of that, because it was like, that wasn't a strong story because you don't have the hero that should be there.
Yeah.
And then the Marvels. Yeah. And then, and again, exactly. And then the Marvels, again, it's if you didn't watch the Disney Plus shows, which we did, so we kind of knew the other characters, it makes more sense. So, but that gets to kind of the point of, like, you know, if you look at these movies that did well, I mentioned No Way Home, that did well because it brought all of the Spider-Men together. From, to your point, it brings in nostalgia. It brings in, oh, what happens if Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Tom Holland's Spider-Man see each other? Now we get to see that. What happens? We get the Green Goblin fighting these people. And it's the same thing with Deadpool and Wolverine. These are two major characters that everybody knows and loves. Wolverine has been around. Hugh Jackman's been playing this role for 20 years. There's a vested interest in this. You know, Deadpool, there's been 2 Deadpool movies. Obviously, they've kind of been like teasing this build up, and they bring in a lot of the other old Fox characters. And like, and that's what I think is, like, if you're going to do these team ups, you do them well. Like, don't just kind of throw them together for no reason. And I kind of think that's why they brought Robert Downey Jr. back for Doctor Doom. So I think, again, seeing the success of this is helping Marvel, I think, kind of right the ship and realize, you know, these team ups can do well. You can do the multiverse right if you have something propelling it. You know, like, there was some Wolverine in the movie ended up in a different place. You know, Deadpool kind of realized he, you know, needs to quit kind of joking around and somewhat step up and be heroic in the end. You know, like, they both kind of grew to a point at the end of the movie. And I think, now having Robert Downey Jr., you're going to get this very interesting movie where, okay, what happens if, whether it's a Tony Stark variant becomes Doctor Doom, or the guy that looks like Tony Stark in our universe is really a villain, and how are all of these heroes, like, how is Spider-Man, how's Peter Parker going to react when a guy that looks like Tony Stark, his idol,
his mentor,
is this supervillain now? And that is going to be so interesting that I think, like, that's where I think Marvel's coming from. It's like, let's make this interesting, and you're going to have so many cool dynamics now that you can do with that, because we have this history with this character versus just bringing somebody new in, because you don't have enough time to build him up before these movies.
And they can even get, like, interesting, you know, going back to, like, Iron Man, they can go back and reshoot similar scenes with Robert Downey Jr. that, like, kind of echo that, but of course it's not the same movie. So they can do, like, little callbacks like that, or even callbacks to the original movie, but they can kind of corrupt it in a way. So there's a lot of interesting creative things that they can do with it to make it interesting for both, you know, the people creating the thing, but also for us as the viewer if we're attuned to those things. Just like, again, with Deadpool, if you didn't, we watched Logan before, and we
rewatched the
Deadpool's
movies,
1 and 2 and Logan. And so because we did that, we were able to really pretty easily pick up on a lot of those little things that they did. But even there were things that we didn't pick up on, like I saw multiple times that Bye 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 was a song that in the one movie.
That was from one of the other X-Men.
Yeah, one of the other, and Wolverine turned it off, and so he started the movie with Instinct's Bye 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 as kind of like a callback to that moment, even though, I mean, Wolverine, we'll say, kind of was in that scene, but really wasn't in that scene. Like, I guess technically sort of was in the scene, but not in the form we're used to seeing him.
Yeah, he was basically dancing on his grave with the song that he hates. Is like basically the joke in it and everything.
Yeah. So, but that whole, I mean, the second that movie opened, like the movie opened up with that, I mean, being a huge NSYNC fan, I mean, that was like a pivotal band when we were growing up.
Yeah, and it started the movie big. Like it set the tone for the entire movie.
I mean, it was really cool what they were able to do with it, where you had like the acrobatics, so it was a cool looking fight scene, but also it was a funny fight scene because it was Deadpool, and Deadpool is dancing literally while he's fighting, but then he's also doing these like very gory maneuvers that are like killing people with these maneuvers, and it's just like, it's so absurdist that it is, you know, it's hilarious. Like it's just very entertaining, and it's something that you don't get to see, and it's something that in any other superhero movie wouldn't fit. You couldn't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's almost why they did it, because it's like, I think a lot of people were concerned, oh, is Disney gonna pull Deadpool back? And it's like, no, you have this immediate opening scene that's like, okay, we're like, it's going to be the Deadpool movies, you know, we're used to and everything. But yeah, you're right. Like kind of going back and, you know, tapping into those scenes that Robert Downey Jr. did as Iron Man. And like, you know, a lot of people, I feel like the knock is, you know, Marvel's just trying to like, you know, bring back Endgame and stuff. But like you brought up nostalgia earlier, and it's like movie studios and people go to that because it works. Like people like nostalgic things. People like to kind of remember those. And again, when you have a short period of time to kind of build up this villain before the Avengers, having somebody that played a character that you watched for 10 years, you're going to kind of have like a natural shorthand built into it. So, you know, again, if they do play his backstory as like a Tony Stark variant, they don't have to go and explain everything he's been through, because you're right, we know so much of what Tony Stark's been through, so they can just show us like, well, here are the things that are slightly different that kind of pushed him on
a different trajectory.
Yeah, this path versus that path, and then it will kind of quickly allow us to kind of explain it and get up to speed there.
So one of the things that I found like really interesting about the Deadpool movie, like since we're going into spoilers now, is when they brought back Chris Evans in that, I forget what they called it, like the zone.
It was in the void.
Yeah, it was in the void. Yeah. So everyone, the second he came in, and they even almost like gave like little tips of the hat that he was going to be Captain America.
He kind of looked dressed like that, like he had blue, like he kind of looked like he had maybe a torn Captain America outfit.
Yeah, so like he looked in so they led our minds down the direction of, oh, he's going to be a Captain America. And then he turned out being the Human Torch, which was so delightful, because you're like, oh yeah, he actually played that a while back. It was a really long time ago. But and then they like even like kind of poked more fun at that. That was delightful. Also, the whole thing about how he was insulting the woman that was in charge, and we thought Deadpool was completely lying, and they showed you in the end credit scene that it was actually true.
Yeah, it was great having him back. I mean, you would have to think he's coming back as Captain America or a variant of Captain America in the Secret Wars, the second Avengers movie that's coming out. I mean, I think basically that movie's going to have everybody that's ever been a superhero in it. I mean, I think they bring back Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield. Like, I think all of these people that are going to be in there will make some sort of cameo. Like, that's going to be, if you thought Endgame had a lot of superheroes in it, it's going to be that, but every universe. More. Yeah, just every kind of single, you know, universe on it. I want to talk about kind of quickly here the anchor beings, because I think that was the big thing. You know, Kevin Feige teased going into Deadpool and Wolverine that this was like behind like Infinity War and Endgame, this was like the next most important movie in terms of the MCU, which again got me kind of excited of like, oh, what's going to happen in this? And then again, like nothing really happens at the end, like in terms of MCU impact. Again, there's character growth, but Deadpool and Wolverine, they're in their own universe. I think, you know, we have the X-Men now, we have mutants, because you have you have X-23, you have Wolverine, like they're kind of reunited. So I think you have a path now to bring in the X-Men, bring in mutants, that sort of thing. So obviously that's important. But then after you think about it, you go, oh, that whole anchor being thing seems like that's probably the important thing. This idea that every universe has this anchor being, and if you lose them, the universe starts dying. And there's kind of rumors that before they got rid of the Kang storyline, that basically it was the TVA was going to be recruiting anchor beings, and that was going to kind of be this movie to fight the Kangs. But I think that's still kind of the key thing, and it's going to be, who is the anchor being of the main, Earth 616, the main MCU timeline here.
So here's an interesting thought of where they can go with all of the movies now that you said this. So, you have a lot of different characters that could be an anchor being, but I think that the most obvious one is Iron Man. But so his existence saved all of not all of, half of humanity from, the snapping.
Half the universe.
Yes, yeah, half of the universe. However, what if it turns out, so they realize that the universe is dying now that Iron Man is dead, but also, he had to die. So it was like a catch-22, like this, like Earth 616 was gone no matter what, because if he didn't stop, well, I guess it would have kept going. Yeah. It's like one of those trade-offs.
Well, and again, the thing is, like, the universe dies over thousands of years. Like, yeah. I think this is going to be a little bit of a tricky thing for them to introduce if they made it somebody like Iron Man, because we know from Loki, the MCU we're in is the sacred timeline, and that Kang was making sure that existed till the end of time. So it's not like that timeline ever died. Yeah. Now, maybe you could say, hey, he was keeping that alive, even though it didn't have an anchor being. So yeah, I mean, I think some of the options are, I think Spider-Man, I think, is a good one, just because Spider-Man is such an important character in Marvel in general. And I think you could make the argument, Peter's sacrifice at the end of No Way Home, that nobody will remember Peter Parker. Like, he's kind of alone now. Because, again, looking at Deadpool and Wolverine, an anchor being is somebody that makes an incredible sacrifice. So, Wolverine at the end of that movie basically willing to sacrifice himself to save Deadpool's universe basically makes him the anchor being again in that universe. Like, they tell him, you don't have to change, you're good enough. So, Peter's sacrifice was seen pretty big. I think, though, Tony Stark and Iron Man's sacrifice at the end of Endgame, it seems like he's, to me, I think would be the favorite to be the anchor being. And I think what that can do is that can kick off, okay, we need to replace him. Let's go, just like Deadpool and Wolverine, let's go find another Tony Stark from another universe. They bring him in, but then this one happens to be Doctor Doom. He happens to turn evil, and then it becomes, again, the Avengers are going to lose through them trying to help. And that kind of is an interesting play too, of like, all right, we're trying to be heroes, we're trying to do the right thing, but it turns against us, and now, again, there's probably going to be, major conflict. Maybe some of the team dies, but then we'll come back again in the second movie, kind of like Infinity War and Endgame. And it's like, okay, now how do you handle that? How do you cope with defeat and failure in the face of trying to do the right thing? And again, it makes it more interesting. Like, I think the Russo brothers did that very well in Infinity War and Endgame, kind of adding the nuance to it. So I think they'll kind of do it well in this one. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all eventually plays out.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other, opportunity that this gives Marvel is to potentially make some of the other movies better in retrospect by saying, hey, maybe Shang-Chi was actually a different universe that we didn't know about. That, it wasn't in the main timeline. It was part of the multiverse. Or, making some of these other characters, like, again, you're watching these movies and it seems like it's not important, but later on it becomes more important. Kind of like some of the callbacks where, Avengers Age of Ultron, people were like, it's not that great of an Avengers movie. But then there were so many callbacks in Endgame with Cap wielding Mjolnir and other things that were happening that people were like going back and going, oh my gosh, this makes this movie better. In retrospect, I want to go watch it. That if you could tie some of that in of like, oh yeah, some of these details that didn't make sense in Shang-Chi of Bruce Banner not being the Hulk in that and his arm still in a sling. It's like, wait, that doesn't seem to fit into the timeline. Well, that's because that's a whole separate Bruce Banner that we didn't know about. Or, just some of these other things that happened that they happen in different universes could go back and be like, oh, that makes it more interesting now, seeing it from that perspective. That's why those things didn't line up. It wasn't because Marvel's slipping. It's because they were laying these breadcrumbs to kind of tie it all together down the line.
Yeah, I think that would make it a lot more interesting. And I feel like a lot of people speculated, especially with Shang-Chi when it came out, that it was maybe another timeline. I really hope. Are they making another Shang-Chi?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, I really hope they do, because I liked the what that movie had. Again, it was like a different kind of like genre. It was more fantasy. I mean, all of these are fantasy, right? But like it was a more like hardcore type fantasy where you had like the float, like there was more like magic, and like I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting, and like the world building in that was pretty cool. So I would like to get back into that world. And there were like dragons, right?
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I believe Marvel has announced they're going to make a second one, but they have very few movies announced. And so I think, again, they are being more cautious on, we're not going to announce 5 years of movies ahead of time, because I think they need to be a little bit more nimble in what they kind of slot in, what happens in the story. I mean, basically, the movies that are announced, we have the next Captain America movie, we have the Fantastic Four movie.
That's with Anthony Mackie.
That's with Anthony Mackie. We have
it looks good.
Yeah, it does. It does look really good. We have the next, we have the new Fantastic Four movie, and I believe Blade is supposed to be coming out next year. I don't think that's probably going to happen. And then you have the 2 Avengers movies, and there's some untitled movies in between those Avengers movies, but nothing's been announced. So is that going to be Shang-Chi 2? Is that going to be a third Doctor Strange movie? Like, and then after that, where does all of this go?
Well, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but they did announce that the Russo brothers are doing the next Avengers
They're doing
movies.
both, yes.
So my guess, if I was a betting person, is that the Russo brothers are currently working on the next Avengers movies, figuring out what they want to happen, how they want this to all come together, so that then they can make that sort of track correctly with the other movies that come out.
I think
that it builds up.
I think they know. I think they know.
You think that they have it all mapped out?
I think they know where they want these next 2 movies to go. I think I think they probably know what movies are going to be in between there too. Again, I think they're just not announcing them. Probably, maybe to a certain extent, because announcing what movies come out in between could help people speculate on what's going to happen in the next Avengers movie. Like if it, because obviously between those 2 Avengers movies, what are you going to have in there? Because I imagine the Avengers with Doctor Doom is going to end with, again, half the the Avengers in shambles, lead into Secret Wars and Battle World and the clashing of the multiverses. So what could you have? Doctor Strange 3 makes sense, because it seemed like at the end of the second Doctor Strange, he was going to fix multiversal issues. So I think that one maybe fits in there. But I think, they kind of have to be careful probably what they announce, because then that's going to leave people like, okay, this is how this is going to go.
I do feel like it has to be Doctor Doom has to be a Tony Stark turned bad, because that is one thing that they have never done. I don't think it's, to my knowledge, that I'm thinking about, is one of the Avengers turned bad.
Have a hero turn into a villain.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
There are other tropes they can reach into and grab.
So much interesting material.
And so that is one that they haven't explored yet, and they would be remiss to not explore that.
Right. Yeah. Take your biggest hero
and make him your biggest
villain. So, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens, and I think this will allow them to kind of then reset everything. I think the interesting question will be okay, this is going to end the multiversal saga, which I feel like just kind of got started because of all these kind of just ups and downs with things. Like, I feel like they never really got their footing on it. So you're going to have these 2 Avengers movies. In the comic books at the end of Secret Wars, the multiverse was condensed down to a single timeline again, and then heroes from all the different universes were kind of thrown back into a prime universe, which doesn't bode well for Loki. I feel like
I was just gonna say, listen, all I really care about is that they bring Loki back again, because I think Loki actually I think is my favorite of all the characters.
I kind of feel like
he's the Captain Jack Sparrow of the Marvel universe.
He is kind of like the Captain Jack Sparrow character, but I kind of feel like, Infinity War opened with Thanos killing Loki. I kind of feel like the next Avengers movie is going to open with Doctor Doom killing Loki, because Loki's holding the multiverse together. And again, Doctor Doom's whole thing in the Secret Wars, he created this place called Battle World where he clashed all the multiverses together, made heroes and villains fight, and then the end of it was creating one single universe, getting rid of the multiverse, creating one single universe that had, Spider-Man from this universe and then Thor from that universe kind of coming together. And I feel like, Loki, it's maybe not looking too good for him.
No.
But that I think will be interesting, though. My point, kind of getting back to it, was once they kind of end this multiversal thing, it's like, okay, where do you go next? I think what will end up happening is that's how we'll get X-Men in. They'll pull, okay, we're going to pull the X-Men in from this universe. We're going to maybe pull, a Spider-Man and a Thor from this universe, that sort of thing. And then it's going to be, okay, now we're back to, one timeline, but I'm not sure who does the next villain become? Like, what's the next thing that's going to push the Avengers forward? And I think that will be interesting to see what they end up doing next, and can it keep people's attention? Because I think the multiversal saga has shown, 15, 20 years of superhero movies, you may have to kind of start fresh with some of these stories, because it becomes almost a barrier to entry to get into this, because you don't know the history of all that stuff. Right.
Yeah, I'm okay with them maybe getting rid of Loki if he fights Alligator Loki, and Alligator Loki is the one that comes out on top.
And he's the new Loki.
So the new Loki has been cast as an alligator, and his name is Albert. Albert the alligator.
Yeah, but
that's the actor that plays him, by the way. The actor is an actual alligator, though.
Okay.
I think that they live for a pretty long time. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really know, but
I think they do.
I feel like they're like 50. I'm really making this up, but they're reptiles, big reptiles.
That's
they
odd.
Tend to
That's
live for a long time.
That's an animal fact that you don't know. You know most animal facts.
Yeah, this is actually gonna bother me. I'm gonna have to look this up real quick about how long alligators live. So the answer to this question is 30 to 50 years. So I was
50.
I was thinking that was sort of like the median, not the high, but that's pretty good.
Yeah, not bad. So, but I think going back to and answering the question that we started this episode with, did Deadpool save the MCU? I think, based on kind of what we talked about, I think he did. And I think even if, everything individually, I think just showing Marvel, again, reminding them, hey, people do like team-ups. People do like multiversal stories if you do it right. People like trying different things in these movies and trying different genres and not just doing a standard, hey, superhero villain, boom, it all ends. They're kind of basically in the same place. But I think the biggest thing is, again, just the change in narrative of now you have a $1 billion property. It's like it hits it out of the park. And I think Disney realizes this because Deadpool is in the parks now, huge. Mm-hmm. And again, people I feel like have not been that excited about Avengers Campus since it opened. Yeah, seeing Deadpool, they threw Deadpool in there. I'm guessing the night before they decided to put Deadpool in that because they're like, we need something.
You're talking about D23, right?
D23.
Yeah, like one of the big, parks announcements.
Right. It was like, we thought they were going to announce something with Deadpool, and it wasn't. He was just there.
The funny part, too, was I thought that they put Deadpool in there as, like, fluff to distract you from the fact that they had nothing, but they announced a lot.
Yeah, they had a lot. They had a lot.
So, yeah, it was just to kind of, like, pander and kind of keep Deadpool, his popularity alive.
And then, again, the Disney Adventure, like we talked about, they literally made an announcement, there's going to be Deadpool. Like, we're going to have Marvel superheroes, but don't worry, Deadpool's going to be one of them. And so I think they realize Deadpool is a huge character, and it's reinvigorated, I think, a lot of people. And you don't, as a movie, reach $1 billion box office without without you kind of appealing to a broader audience and getting people to go multiple times. So again, this is a pretty, widespread, I think, appeal to it. People have to be going multiple times. It's getting people excited, and now it's changing the narrative. It's getting people who maybe have not gone to see a Marvel movie in the past 5 or 6 years seeing it, and now maybe they are excited of like, oh, what's going to happen with the next Captain America? Oh, Robert Downey Jr. is back. Like, what's going to happen with this Avengers movie? And that's, in entertainment and stuff, it's really just all about momentum. And now they have the positive momentum that I think can kind of propel them forward. And I think you're going to look back on it and be like, Deadpool and Wolverine was the turning point in kind of, this decade of Marvel movies.
Yeah, I kind of see it as Deadpool is to the Marvel universe right now as Snoop Dogg was to the Olympics.
You know what? If you would have had Snoop Dogg and Deadpool at the Olympics.
What if Snoop Dogg was one of the many Deadpools? That would have been so
funny.
good.
Well, yeah, they had like Matthew McConaughey. They had Paul Mullins from Wrexham.
Yep.
They had a bunch. Yeah, they could have had a Snoop Dogg Deadpool. That seems like a missed opportunity there.
It does. Snoop, I guess they already had Dogpool, but Snoop Doggy Dog
But
Pool.
he was an actual dog.
Snoop Doggy Dog Pool.
There you go.
Oh, that would have been so good.
Maybe Deadpool 4.
Deadpool 4.
Deadpool 4, yeah. But yeah, so overall, I think it was a great movie. I think really excited again for the MCU to see where they go from here. I think the next few movies they have announced are going to be really exciting. Looking forward to Captain America. Looking forward to Fantastic Four. I don't think Blade's coming out, but looking forward to that whenever that does come out, and to see what they do with Robert Downey Jr. and these next Avengers movies. So love to hear from our listeners. What do you think? Are you more excited, less excited about the MCU? Do you think Deadpool made an impact? If you're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comments below. If you're listening to this, you can let us know on Instagram. We're at Enchanted Ears Podcast over there. But that wraps up the show for this week. I want to thank everybody again for listening. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for lending us your ears.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you here next Monday.
Bye-bye.